Hi, this is Senator Adam Hollier, and this is the We Can Do Better podcast, where we talk to interesting people who are doing amazing and fun work in the Second Senate District and across Michigan. And so today I have two really exciting guests. As you all know, March is Reading Month, and it's also Women's History Month, and obviously it's a lot of things going on here in March. So we have Amy and Stephanie. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself? And then Stephanie, you can fall right in.
Sure. My name is Amy Nielander, and I am a children's picture book author, illustrator, and also a Detroit Writing Room children's book coach.
And thank you so much, Senator, for having us here today. My name is Stephanie Steinberg. I'm the founder of the Detroit Writing Room, located on Washington Boulevard in downtown Detroit, and also the executive director of Coaching Detroit Forward, which is our nonprofit arm. And we work with Detroit high school students and teach them writing and photography and other creative skills. So I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. So Stephanie, can you tell us what the Detroit Writers Room is and what you do, how people get involved, like what the goal is, how it happened, all the things.
Yeah.
Tell us all the stuff. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a long story, but the shorter version of it is I'm a journalist by trade. I spent a few years at the Detroit News reporting on entrepreneurs and the arts community and all the fun things that was happening in downtown Detroit in 2016, 2018. And I saw a lot of opportunities and things that were needed in the downtown area. One of them was a space to give book talks and writing workshops and host open mic nights and poetry readings. And that didn't really exist in the downtown area at the time. So I also have a team of writing coaches, which Amy is one. And as a journalist, a lot of people come to me for writing help,
Okay.
whether it's a resume or an application for something, or maybe their website they want to tweak. And I thought, wouldn't it be a great service to offer coaches that anyone in the community can sign up with for that one-on-one help on a project? So, for example, Amy is our children's book coach, and she coaches children's book authors or aspiring children's book authors and gives them amazing advice on how to get their work published. So I melded my ideas of coaching, book talks, writing workshops into one space that is physically in downtown Detroit, but we are currently virtual due to the pandemic. So all of this stuff is taking place on Zoom. And you don't have to be in downtown Detroit necessarily to reach our coaches. You can be anywhere across the world, really.
Okay. So Amy, $64,000 question. How do you coach someone on illustrating on Zoom? Because, maybe I want to draw a children's book, but I have very limited drawing ability. And, like, how do you get to that, right? Like, online coaching has become an increasingly popular thing and people are starting to do more of it and it's becoming a thing. How does that look for this?
Right. That's a great question. Well, I have been able to work with mostly writers. I haven't had too many clients looking at illustrating so far. But when I do meet a writer who also wants to illustrate their own story, it really just is practice. It's not something that you're going to solve in a few days. I mean, it took me about 5 years to get to where I was before I was published. I did not go to school for illustration. That was an art that I learned after when I was starting my own family. And so for any writer who's interested in drawing, it just is about observing and drawing. And that's really what it is. And as far as coaching the writers go, I take a look at their manuscript and provide them with really detailed feedback about the areas in their stories that could be improved. We talk about what's working and areas to grow your story. And so all of the clients that I've worked with have been so receptive, and writers are always looking to make their work better, I think. So naturally, that's something that they want to improve. But yeah, so Zoom is making it possible. We're making it work.
And so Stephanie, how did you get this idea, to help folks get coaching and writing and kind of build out the infrastructure for people crossing that thing off their bucket list? Like you hear a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm going to write a book one day. But I think that always feels like a tome to me. It's right, like I'm going to write this giant this giant book. And, I have a 3-year-old. So the books I read are not that thick. And when they're that thick, it's like 20 stories. So yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I think I hear that a lot too. A lot of people come to us saying like, I want to write a book. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much work actually goes into first writing the book and then figuring out how to get it published and then figuring out how to market it because that's a whole other separate piece of it. You can have the best book in the world, but then if no one sees it,
Mhm.
you know, so really, I found coaches who are all award-winning authors, journalists. We've got even screenwriters and grant writers on our team. Any kind of writing need you might have. We've got a business plan coach. We have a podcast coach. We also have beyond writing. We have a couple of photography coaches and graphic design coaches. So all of these creative fields do meld together. Whether you're writing a book or working on some other writing related project, you'll probably need graphics to go with it, or you'll need photography to go with it. So we're kind of a one-stop shop for any kind of creative need that you have. We probably have a coach for you. Um, I'll just mention, we opened the New York Writing Room last summer, which is our first virtual chapter. We do not have a physical location in New York City, but we do have a team of 10 coaches in New York City.
Okay.
So even if you're in Detroit, you can meet with those coaches too.
Why would anyone want to meet with New York coaches? They won't be fun.
They're pretty cool. I would say we have a literary agent on that team, and she's very popular. A lot of people don't understand how to find a literary agent or what they do to help you get your book published. So she's been one of our very popular coaches in New York.
So Amy, it's reading month, and I imagine more adults are reading little kids' books. And I won't lie in that I'm sure, I've had the thought of like, I could totally do this. Like this, there are like 50 words in this entire book, and they repeat on every page. Like, have you ever read Click Clack Moo? I
Yes.
mean, it's like there are not very many words. It's like click clack moo, and cows that type. But you know,
Yes,
what's
there.
what makes them work? Like,
What makes them work is they have to be engaging. They really have to stray and sit with the child to make them want to read that book again. I think that's the magic of it. That story is not going to be read one time. It has to stick with them, kind of like a Broadway show. Those songs are designed to always travel with you when you are not in the theater anymore. And so it's almost the same thing with a children's book. That child will want to go back and read that book. So the author has to give them a reason to re-engage with the story. And a lot of the times that's the hardest part. You have to use language, you have to use diction, you've got to use a memorable character that resonates with them. And so, it's a juggling act with all the different elements in a picture book, and you're limited by words. So some people don't think that there's, you can write a story as long as you want to, but really a picture book these days under 500 words is what is something authors are working towards or writers are working towards. Anything higher than that becomes oh, can we shorten it possibly? I mean, it's different with different publishers, but you are limited to the amount of words, so that's another challenge.
yeah, I'm like time. I'm like, ooh, is that a 5-minute story? Lily, if it's longer than 5 minutes, we might have to break this up. You'll get half today, half tomorrow. Because she gets a story from me and her mom. And I'm like, Lily, it's a long story. Your mom can read half, and I'll read the other half. She's like, okay, Dad.
Well, I like the stories when my son was younger. He would wake up very early and he would want to read right away. And so it was cracking that book open at 6 a.m. and we would read the story. And a lot of the times it was maybe, a classic story like Winnie the Pooh or something. And then as soon as we got to the last page, he would just flip it back over to the first page and back we were again.
Oh, no.
And so it was over and over. But yeah, they love them.
Yeah, my wife got Lily like this whole series of those golden books. Is that right? The ones. And I'm like, that's not the whole story, but I'm like, oh, they shortened it. And sometimes they do a really good job of shortening it. Sometimes they don't. And so it's an interesting mix. So Stephanie, that's got to be kind of what it's like. I bring you my giant manuscript and you're like, yeah, 30% of this is trash. Just put that away. And like, nobody needs all that character development. Like, how do you talk to authors when they're like, I think this is really important?
Yeah, I think that can be a challenge, for some authors, cutting words, it's like cutting children.
Mhm.
But I do think, if you're going to go and publish your own book, you're going into this process where it takes time, takes revisions. You have to be receptive to feedback and other people's edits. And sometimes that might mean cutting out entire chapters of your book if you don't need them. So I think anyone who wants to write and publish a book just has to go into it with like open eyes, knowing that it might turn out entirely different than what they had originally written in their first draft.
Okay, so how does someone go about that first book, right? So let's say I'm your patron. I'm like, you know what? I think I've lived an interesting life. I'm gonna write an autobiography. What's the first step? Is it write down everything I've ever done in my life? Is it find a coach? Is it, write a story arc? Is it write a book report? Like where do I start with the story of me?
Well, everyone, it can be a personal decision. Everyone goes a different path sometimes. Some people like to sit down and outline their books chapter by chapter and include what's in each one. That's called a plotter. Some people
Mm,
are pantsers, which means they just write by the seat of their pants.
me.
And whatever happens and comes on the page, they just go with it. But for something like an autobiography, if it's about you and your life, I would say to sit down and write an outline first,
Mm.
making sure you hit like the main points of what you want to include, go chronologically, dig back into your memory to, pull out those juicy details from your childhood. Um, that is something I think an outline would be helpful for.
All right, Amy, what do you think?
I would say the same thing with picture books being shorter. Writing them down might just be a page worth. So it's not as monumental as writing a novel down. So some people still do outline though, or even pitch. You can start with a pitch. You could put together 2 or 3 sentences to really distill what the heart of your story is and what the hook might be. And sometimes when I'm having a hard time with a story, and I'm not getting anywhere, I just go back to that pitch. How would I pitch it? And it helps me focus on what the heart of it is. And then I can go back and build it a little bit more. But I agree, just writing it down or outlining.
I've never thought about a book pitch. Give me a book pitch. Give me one of your book pitches.
Oh boy. Okay. I will pitch my Grandma's Hug, which is this picture book that was released in 2020. It's
Okay.
published by Page Street Kids. So, Grandma is a devoted grandma, and she has a granddaughter who is a space loving child. And they never part ways without a hug until one day that moment almost slips away. There's my pitch.
Mm. Okay, now what happens? I need to know.
Yes, there you go. So now you can read the story.
Authors are always so tricky. There's always a cliffhanger. This is why I hate previews. So I never watch previews. I hate them. I hate all previews. My favorite thing about movies and stories is to guess what's going to happen, and I feel like previews prejudice my ability to guess
It can
because
ruin.
like I know what's going to happen now. You've already shown me.
Yes.
Okay, so what's your favorite book? What's your favorite? Yes, Stephanie's like, ooh, that's a hard one. Huh? It's like, what's my favorite kid is?
I get this question a lot, and I always go back to it's not a book I would read for pleasure, but it's one that I give other writers to get better at writing, and it's called On Writing Well by William Zinsler.
Hmm.
And again, it's not a pleasure read, like you're not going to read this on the beach, but he gives you a lot of great advice on just writing tips and how to make your writing more concise and pop. And if you really are serious about becoming a writer, you should read this book.
Mm.
That's my tip.
What about you, Amy?
Yes, I always recommend when I am working with a client this book, Writing Picture Books. It's by Anne Whitford Paul. And this is I've got tons of notes here because there are so many good points about it. But this is something I wish I had when I was starting out. And I feel like it's full of wonderful examples of picture books that you can go and find at your library and read. So I feel like that's a great one. And from a picture book standpoint, I would say one of my first author illustrators that I learned about was Marla Frazee, and this is a book by her, All the World, but
Mhm.
she is just an extraordinary author and illustrator, and she actually, the Boss Baby, that was based on the book that she wrote in picture book form. And so, yeah, she's just been a lot of fun to watch her career.
That's cool. Although now you're making me like, oh man, maybe I should pull some books off my shelf,
Oh,
Amy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help but want to keep them nearby. I'm a visual person. I need the visuals.
Right. I did a school read last week, and they were like, "What's your favorite book?" And I was like, "It's Musashi by Miyamoto." And they're like, "Oh yeah." And so like I pulled it off my shelf, and it was cool. And they were like, "That's a big book." And I'm like, "Yeah." It's the only book I've ever read twice. I'm not a huge big reader of books. I listen to tons of audiobooks, and now that I have a 3-year-old, I mean, I read a story every night, so sometimes multiple stories. But yeah.
Totally counts.
Okay, so
I
no, were you
mentioned,
gonna say something, Stephanie?
yeah, I was going to mention we have a book club.
Ooh.
So if you're looking for some like good books to read, Amy is actually our last featured author in the book club. But each month we're featuring a different local author. And so you want to come join us for our next one, it's actually next week on Tuesday. Judge Rosemary Aquilina, who presided over the Larry Nassar case, has written a bunch of crime novels. So if you're into crime, come join us next Tuesday. It's going to be a really good talk.
Yeah. Everything I add to my life is like happy things. So my 3-year-old and I, like, most people are like, dang, they have to watch little kid movies. I'm like, ha, honey, now someone else wants to watch the things with me. So like she's really into She-Ra, and they're like, oh, it's cute that your daughter. She said, no, I was watching She-Ra well before her. Like I was 3 seasons in before she was even born. So, I mean,
I love it.
so, but okay, so it's Women's History Month. Do you have someone that we should know about?
There's so many. Like this is the hard part because when you say one person, like that doesn't seem fair because there's so many women that I look up to and I've, you know, they've inspired me in so many ways. So like I hate to single out one person necessarily.
Just to highlight. It's not to say that others aren't super valuable. Just today we're talking about one of them.
Amy, do you want to go first?
Okay, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about a blog that I have, and I only am bringing this up because I've been thinking about Women's History Month this month. And basically it's a place for families or teachers to go to for just creative inspiration. And every month I create shapes, and those shapes come from experiences over the weekend or a place that I went. And so, for example, this month they came from the Dodge Mansion. And so I just took different pictures from inside and then I put them together on an activity sheet. And then it's up to kids to turn them into any character they want to. And then I'll share my results at the end of the month. And so this month, all of my characters were focused on Women's History Month. So I learned about these women that I had never heard of before. And so a couple were the Blackwell sisters. So that was the first medical doctor in the United States. It was Elizabeth Blackwell. And I learned about Augusta Savage, who was an American sculptor back in the 1920s. And she was part of this Harlem Renaissance that was in the 20s, where she impacted many artists and during that time with her pieces of work. And then I learned about Sophia Hayden, who was the first woman to receive an architecture degree from MIT. And that was back in, I think early 1900s. And so it's just been really fun learning about these women and then incorporating them into this activity. So hopefully some families out there found it inspiring, or if it sounds interesting, families can go to my website, which is amynielander.com to find activities every month. So
Nielander.
yeah. Yep. So Nielander, it sounds like, your knee and Knee, but it's not spelled that way. It's NIE and then Lander. So
But Amy, AMYNIELANDER.com.
yes, that's right. Thank you.
Cool. All right, Stephanie, you're on the clock now.
All right. Well, here's what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna highlight a couple of our women coaches who I'm always
Okay.
inspired by, including Amy. She's one of
Oh,
them. I was actually earlier in the pandemic toying with my own children's book, and I came to her for help as well. So even I need a coach.
Mhm.
Um, but we've got some amazing women on our team, including Felicia Henderson, who was my editor at the Detroit News. She retired recently and now is working in newsrooms focusing on diversity efforts. But she was a big inspiration to me when I was working as a reporter. And having that woman above you as an editor shows you what you can be and what you can do. So I always appreciated that. We've also got Coach Anna Clark on our team. She wrote a book, The Poison City, which is about the Flint water crisis, and
Mhm.
it's obviously a really important book to read. She's also now working for ProPublica, so she's reporting and spotlighting things that people need to know in the community. I mean, we have so many women coaches; it's hard to like name all of them, obviously. But if you guys are interested, if you're listening and you want to check them out, you can also go to our website, DetroitWritingRoom.com, and they're all on the coaches page.
Awesome. Okay, so as we've been thinking about this year, well, I guess we're in a new year, but since pandemic started, people being conscious of their own mental health has become increasingly important. And a number of folks have always found reading and books and kind of a good escape to take your mind off of what's going on. But most people also don't like to do their job as their stress reliever. So if you're as writers, what have you been doing for your own mental health, noting that you may not get the same escape from a book that other people do?
I would say though I do. Like for me,
Okay.
like I love escaping into a book and just letting the whole world melt away and I'm just now engrossed and transported somewhere else. Like for me, that taking a book outside in the sunshine with maybe if I can say it as a glass of wine, like that is my prime escape, let me tell you.
So what are you reading right now?
I just finished All Rise, which is our featured book club book for next week. It was a like 400-page novel, and um, Judge Rosemary Aquilina, she's got some amazing characters in there. I gotta say, like I was turning the pages, like let's get to the end. I want to know who did it, who murdered this person. So
Okay. What about you, Amy?
I like to exercise. That's something that I try to do every morning. That's how I start my day, and that helps really relieve any stress that I might have. So that's something that I really enjoy doing, and I make time for in the morning. But also I write. I've been trying to just do journal writing, and I back in August, I got away from that for a while. I used to do that often, but then there's kind of a gap of time from when I did it last. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go get a composition book and every day just write one page. It doesn't have to be anything, specific. And basically what it is kind of logging, this is what happened yesterday. I did this, I have this to do. But I mean, just kind of getting it out of my head just relieves, I think, some of that, any stress that might be lingering, from news or, what might be happening in schools. So I find that also helps me kick my day off and frees some space up for me.
Well, you kind of did a 2-for-1 because the next question is always, what are you doing to stay physically active? So what
Yeah.
kind of exercise are you doing? Are you a tapes, you lifting heavy weights? Are you a runner, cycling? Are you Pelotoning? What's your thing?
No running. I have a subscription, so I just, tap into whatever program is happening. And so that's what I do. Just watch DVD. It used to be DVDs, but everything is so subscription based now. DVDs, I'm noticing, are kind of like programs aren't as available as they used to be unless you subscribe and do a download or streaming. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, my daughter found some DVDs and she was like, DVDs? DVDs? Like, I was like, oh, I guess you've never had to deal with those kind of things. We're like trying to explain to her commercials, and she was like, I don't understand. What about you, Stephanie?
So So we host yoga for writers with the writing room once a month. It's always on a Saturday from 10 to noon. So the first hour is yoga virtual, and then the second hour is journaling. So it melds two worlds together in a beautiful way. So I like doing yoga. I like going outside and taking walks with my big golden doodle. He's probably right outside the store right here waiting to come inside, but he's a handful to take on a walk. So that's how I get my exercise in usually.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you and hearing about the really cool work that you're doing. Is there anything an aspiring author or person who's just been thinking, maybe I want to do this for fun, what's that first step? How do they, if you're leaving them the best advice you have for right now of like, I want to do this, how do you get off the couch?
I'm going to say just get started. Like if you've got an idea, sit down, take your journal and start writing, or your laptop, whatever you like to write with, and just get it out. Like that's step one. Get it out on paper, and then everything else will come after that. But it's got to get out of your head and onto the page first.
Yep, I agree. Just getting it down on paper, that's the hardest part for a lot of people. And then also reading what you're trying to write. So if you're wanting to write a picture book, go and check out a bunch of picture books and read them so you know what is on bookshelves and you know how you fit in the industry. So, excuse me, sorry about that.
No problem. Cool. Well, Amy, Stephanie, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been really exciting. I'm sure folks are going to be very excited about engaging with your work and just having a little bit more understanding about some of the cool things that are happening in the city and across the state. So this has been another episode of the We Can Do Better podcast with Senator Adam Hollier. And we're really grateful to have two amazing women here during March's Reading Month, during Women's History Month, as we talk about the Detroit Writers' Room. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.